Current Cedar Riverside resident, been in the Twin Cities since 2014 and started my organizing journey with the Workers' Rights Campaign to raise Minneapolis minimum wage to $15 an hour, and also being part of a variety of coalitions led by Black people around and against police brutality in our communities. I'm stemming from Jamar Clark, Orlando, George Floyd, and most recently Dante Wright. I'm also a community organizer with our statewide teachers union, so I do a lot of work around organizing to fully fund our public schools. Right now, supporting a campaign for universalizing childcare, and also just, I think, just showing up in our communities for different struggles. Like that's where you find out where you're most useful. So that could be around housing, that could be around environmental justice. And as you show up, you get to make those linkages and see the interconnections of all these issues that many of us feel like I'm only supposed to do this one thing. So those are kind of, and also all those things have inspired me. I'm running for Minneapolis City Council as a Democratic Socialist. So yeah, even bringing organizing into such a often anti-democratic space, such as City Hall and our political arena. So yeah, I'll leave it here.
Hello everyone, I'm Amira. My pronouns are she and her. I am actually up until recently was an independent curator, arts administrator. I'm currently in the middle of a career transition, so I'm actually going to be going to law school in the fall. So I'm going to be shifting into something else at the time. But I work at the Walker Arts Center currently, and recently for the past year and a half, have been organizing a union. And so for me, that labor organizing is like really where I found kind of like my grounding. It's probably one of the most formative things that has happened up until now. And yeah, there's a lot that goes like within that. I feel like labor organizing, even though like the thing that you're looking for is a union, like really is like a cultural shift that happens. Relationship is very relationship-based relational work. So that's where I'm coming from. So it's like kind of like labor organizing within an arts world, predominantly white arts space that I'm emerging from. Yeah, so that's me. I'm really happy to be here. Super refreshing to be like in a space with people. Like I don't know, it's like really just amazing to like kind of be here with you guys. So.
Yeah, thank y'all for being here. So let's talk a little bit about labor organizing and things like running for city council as a independent socialist, particularly around scale. Sometimes I think in organizing spaces we're hard on ourselves when it comes to scale, meaning the amount of folks we have in a room, right? And we don't usually affirm our clusters, right? The small scale gathering, right? That we build those linkages and those bonds with. Can you all think out loud about just a moment where you're like, this cluster is important? This conversation that we're having in this small group, either at the Walker Arts Center or door knocking or running for city, this cluster that I'm sitting in right now is important. Can you think out loud about if that was a recent moment or just in general about valuing this small scale?
I think in my experience, like not adopting, and you kind of mentioned that, like production, like centralizing your organizing around production, which leads to scale. Like I have to turn out the most people to an action, or I have to do the most action. I think what has been most crucial in my kind of development as an organizer in the Twin Cities was those small clusters. And I call it like, we're your squad, essentially. Like you create, let's say, housing is your jam. Like that gives you life. The first thing you want to do is also find other folks who share that same interest with you. So you connect with people. Like, you're doing that even right now. Like, you start there. And then from that, you grow kind of that ecosystem of like, okay, who else is doing this work? Okay, and that's when you learn, oh, you know, it's happening over in North. Like, we got folks who are trying to build a house co-op. Like, and then you show up there, and then you start collaborating. So I think it's literally starting, like even my campaign, it started with 5 of us. And many of us came from like these are my trusted like squad members from like the Fight for 15 campaign, who I know who's been on the streets and in the front lines when it comes to police and justice in our city, and like saying, I think this is a historic moment for change in our city. And now we have, you know, over months and months and months of like having 2-person meetings, like during nights, like we have a volunteer base of like 100, over 100. And that took though like 5 of us. Like making the time, being comfortable with, you know, again, having smaller conversations. So not necessarily, and all of this is with a goal in mind, which I'm seeing, you know, part of organizing is you do want some victories in the issues that you're organizing around, because that creates morale. Like even now, we just had the conviction of Derek Chauvin. And even that conviction, he's the only one in the history of Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, a police officer that's been convicted. But look at how much has happened for that conviction to be brought down. It took people being in the streets. It took stuff being burned down. It took other folks being murdered at the hands and brutalized by like our state. It took meetings like this where folks literally, you know, gathered in George Floyd Square, sometimes 2 people, 3 people, holding it down. Like, there was a multitude of small clusters of events and community gatherings that built for that. And we needed that to give us that morale to continue this fight, because we just had Dante right. We know none of this is going away, but you also have to have an end goal. Our end goal in my campaign is like, we want police-free futures. And how do you build a community to see value in that future, to build for that future? So I think everything starts with like planting seeds. You don't need 50 people to come out to like change your community and change your world. And especially for Black people, it's always been, you know, a few of us in our kitchens, in our homes, on the block, that's like made monumental changes for our communities.
Absolutely, and I resonate with everything that you say. And I'm trying to I'm like thinking and talking out loud. I appreciate your patience. But I completely agree. I think like one of the things that we found in terms of our like unionizing at the Walker, which is like a very small, it's like 150 people like who work. That's like, in terms of scale, that's a small community, right? But it still took like a year and a half to even talk to everyone, because so much of, I think, in what we find in a lot of like white supremacist spaces is things are very siloed. People don't talk to each other. People don't relate to each other, I think. And that's what we were finding at Walker. And it happened that there was us talking about like how we make our working conditions better, people talking over here, people talking in another corner of the institution. And so in the beginning especially, it was like, how do we make sure that those conversations are not siloed? Because it only benefits the bosses when that is true, like when we're not talking to each other. It only benefits the oppressor when we're not talking to each other. And so I think for us it was like, it's so awkward to talk to that person. I have nothing in common with that person. Like, why would I reach out to them? That's the weird Minnesotan social awkwardness that you just have to get through, because like it's so much better when you know each other. And I think like those relationships that you build, like literally a lot of our organizing is like getting drinks with people, getting coffee with people, going bowling. Like I don't even like bowling, but it's like if I can invite you to do something that I don't even want to do, so that we can be somewhere, so that we can have a conversation, so that we can build a relationship. Because when things get hard, like it's going to be easy for people to opt out. It's harder to opt into the work, right? So what we had to do was make it easy for folks. At some point also, which is what we found in our organizing, because we were building a union from scratch, right? So what we found was that it was true that a lot of folks like really loved their jobs, and it was true that they were being emotionally manipulated by their bosses, that they were being underpaid, that they were being forced to work, like, or pressured into working outside of their hours, and so they were doing unpaid work. Even though they love their job, they're still being exploited. And so how do I help this person to understand what I understand? And not like, not impose on them, but also just like have a conversation that maybe they've never had before, helping them realize that that's like very difficult to realize, right? That it's like literally you're being exploited right now. And I think those conversations are harder to have with people that you don't know. So like you have to take the time to build relationships. I like it literally would not be possible without. And I think, and then that goes to like in the middle of when we were organizing, COVID happened. We had several waves of layoffs. So around 60 people were laid off, and that's a lot of people. When we started from like a 200-person environment unit, 60 people is like most of our colleagues, right? A lot of our colleagues. A lot of those people were the lowest paid part-time workers. So for most people who I was organizing with for at the time, because of the silos, because we talked to each other, they didn't even feel that we were missing like a third of our staff. But we still raised from within people who are currently working at the Walker, raised over $10,000 in mutual aid. And we were able to do that because we knew each other, because we could reach out to each other, and because we could say, hey, I know that you don't know so-and-so, but so-and-so is my friend, just like we're friends, I'm trying to help so-and-so, like I need you to donate like $250, and I know it's a lot to you, but like we need to get that person direct money by 2 days from now. And I just don't think, even though we weren't public with our meeting yet, it literally would not be possible to do that work unless we're doing this other work, right? So, to your point, which I think is so important, was all of the issues are interconnected. And even though I might care about labor, and this other person might care about like how far apart the paintings are on the wall, and something that I just don't care about, but they care deeply about it. How do I like? There's something. The two things are connected, right? Because that person's passion is also labor, and they need to get compensated for it. And I care that they're compensated for it. I don't care about the other stuff that happens in the music. I'm not gonna lie. But it's like, yeah, kind of just having those conversations that you just can't have without knowing that person, I guess. So I hope that makes sense. That wasn't redundant, but that's my answer.
Yeah, and by all means, if y'all have questions, feel free to jump right in. So yeah, and I love the comment on us not talking to each other only benefits the bosses, right? So if this movement is predicated on relation, and then so something I've been thinking about is how do we not fall for false victories, or how do we discern between keeping your imagination alive constantly, and could you all think out loud about, are there times in systems where they present something that seems like it could be a win, but it might be a distraction, right? And how do we, as folks doing this work, discern between that? Because it's tricky. It's very hard. Is this a meaningful concession, or is this something to sort of distract? How do you think out loud about that?
Yeah, I love that question because it's totally a leading question. Yeah, I mean, definitely the answer is yes. And I think that, for example, like the classic one within labor is like, once you go public with the union, you've been organizing for a year, the boss starts offering people raises, which did happen at the Walker. And those people take the raise in order to like, because it's like beneficial to them in the short term, or they take the promotion because it's beneficial to them in the short term, losing sight of like the broader community, and then we lose votes, and then our union does not succeed. We ended up getting like 90% of the vote, so it didn't super work. But it's like those things that they're going to try and like tease you away from like the longer term solution. That's like the first thing that comes to my mind. They did not dare approach me with that because I don't think that would have ever gone over well with me. But it definitely does happen, and I think it's like it's a testament to the relationships that we built with the community that we built that it's like that it didn't.
Right.
I think on my end, what has been a tool of discernment for me is when I mentioned I'm a socialist, it's not because it's trending. It's because that's my political analysis in which I assess the world around me. So that means I understand that systemically we all, which I think we all can agree, we live under a system of capitalism where corporations such as Amazon gets to profit and benefit from our labor so that we can continue to be bickering and fighting for crumbs while Jeff Bezos, lights up his home every day with like riches. And under that system, it thrives. It requires racist dynamics so that you can have groups of people relegated to exploited labor. It allows certain groups of people to be concentrated in the most toxic areas of the cities because that's where you can store trash. Like that's where you don't have to invest in housing. That's where you don't have to invest in public schools. So that analysis lets me know what I'm up against. And it also lets me know how Jeff Bezos thinks. Like thinking of the labor union right now. Alabama, workers in Alabama tried to unionize Amazon. That was like a major fight out there. And folks were disheartened to see those workers have lost that union drive. And a lot of folks was like, how? You had Bernie Sanders, you had everybody ready, like all of us know it's crappy to work at Amazon. You might get paid a decent wage, but you don't get no breaks. You get harmed on, the assembly line. Like, it's horrible, hostile work conditions. And what they didn't know is Jeff Bezos has the best team of lawyers and knows how to recruit people, workers themselves, to go around and say, actually, there's no benefit of the union. We already pay you well. They just gonna come and take your money and do nothing and not acknowledging, like most workers, like we have no understanding of the benefits of unionization. Because many of us, if you're a millennial, you grew up in a workforce that was heavily part-time or contracts, not in places where you were guaranteed a pension, guaranteed any type of economic stability under capitalism. So for me, assessing like, okay, Jeff Bezos won because he went in and organized workers against their own interests. And that's a tool of the oppressor to make us think that concessions and breadcrumbs are something that we need to be happy for. And I think even with the case of Chauvin, for instance, that's a concession that took a lot of work, but a concession for who? Because now it's being spun as if, oh, our justice system does work. When not all this work, we, protested. We had literally, and this is also analysis, under a capitalist state, you also have a political class of leaders who are beholden to corporate forces at the end of the day. So the fact that our Democratic governor was really willing to send and go to war with unarmed civilians less than 4 days ago. And if we didn't, and all on the basis of the uprising that young people led last year, just to say, treat us as humans, acknowledge our human rights, stop having a police force that's predicated on targeting and violating people's basic human rights and their democratic rights to peacefully assemble. You were willing to deploy more troops into our communities than we ever have in Afghanistan, than you are to fully fund our schools and our housing. That actually creates safety in our community. That actually creates jobs in our community. That's not a system I want to stay there. If the Chauvin case was an embodiment of that we can make this system work. And for me, that lets me know, as an organizer, we have a lot of work. Because there was a lot of contradictions. Again, Black people are like, nah, we're not nowhere done. Because look, we just had Dante Wright. We had, Micaiah Bryant in Ohio, Adam Toledo in Chicago. Like, we are far from over. George Floyd is one of 65,000 who's been murdered by the police across this country. We have so much work, and until we're willing to employ analysis of how do we get corporations out of the mixture, how do we actually democratically own the things in our communities so that it's centered on the needs of people, we're going to continue having these mediocre prices because the state at the end of the day wants to preserve itself. And that's my analysis. That's another accessible example.
Yeah.
Joe Biden. I'm sorry, that wasn't a victory. That was not a victory. It was a collective sigh of relief because we had a tyrant like Donald Trump. Except Donald Trump was up front and bold with his. Joe Biden is secretive. He supported more people, especially African immigrants, in the first 90 days of his presidency than Donald Trump did. So the idea that, that lets me in, knowing that Biden is a tool of a capitalist state that's about preserving its corporate and capitalist interests.
Thank you for bringing up the top of the state. We've been building our organizations and I'm just supporting it because that's what we have to do for survival. I mean, look at the real estate that's about it. As a person that's running for an office and it's not called DFL or Republican, how do you build your modes of relationships? Because that's something that I'm just really interested in because I'm a little older and I have a different way of doing it. And you say, as a millennial, what does that mean about building coalitions and talking to people to actually change their minds?
I think one of the benefits, because what we're hoping to prove as running as independent, that any person that's committed to building change for their community, you do not have to attach yourself to political interests and parties that we know time and time again betray us. And there is a huge opening for that. Like, as someone who supported Bernie Sanders, we saw that. His whole message was like, we need a political revolution because what we have right now benefits the 1% and not the 99. And he turned out tons of people, young people in the streets that was like, yes, I get that. And then we also saw the old guard of the Democratic wing block that because, again, they're interested in that. And all the energy we saw built around his campaign was around these radical ideas, which are not. Everyone deserves a livable wage. Everyone deserves universal housing, quality housing. And that's when we meet people at the door. People, like, we're talking about public safety right now. We're not even starting on the threshold of should we bring more cops into our communities. It's more, don't you think your neighbors deserve housing? Because if they have housing, they're safe. You don't have to worry about if that house next door becomes a trap house. Because guess what? The school in your community is fully funded. It has high quality educators. It has anti-racist curriculum that's being taught to our babies. When you think that makes your neighborhood feel safe, and people are like, woo, what you mean? That's not what we're getting. And I think that is the most of relationships of like building a political program that's grounded in everybody's everyday realities. And also exposing the falseness of you have to go Democrat in order to win. Exposing how they hurt us. And part of it is giving them the opportunity to discover the power that lies within them. That's what labor organizing is about. Giving workers the ability to fight for themselves. Not outsourcing that function or that responsibility onto anyone else. So we're going to the doors and saying, fight with us. I'm not going to go in city council alone as a lone wolf and tax the rich. That's part of my platform as an anti-capitalist. Like, they need to pay. I need you to do that with me. And when we do things together, as you can see, we can make, tsunamis happen overnight when we're told that those same things can't be accomplished. So I think it's really grounded in those everyday material realities. And people resonate with that and just be honest with them.
Are people also attracted to, you were all talking about victories? Because people are always looking for something that we get, as opposed to we're fighting against. It's like, what am I going to be getting?
And it is getting I'm sorry. Go for it.
I really want to hear what you have to say too. So if you want to go first, you can go first.
I was just going to say, it's acknowledging the victories that have been, like when we talk about the fight for 15, we framed it as we're literally, and it was a small coalition of us, mostly led by hourly Black and brown workers who had to sue city council multiple times for $30,000. But what we framed that is like, yes, you got that $30,000, but you also took more than $1 billion out of the pockets of the wealthiest Fortune 500 companies in affluent households. in our city and put it directly back to the pockets of workers who generate that. That's a win. Like, you finally got money out the pockets of the folks who most profit from us. And folks like that. And you need to amplify those wins that you win together. That you have to have that morale. And it's the smallest. Even for us, I was involved with Neighbors in Ward 2. We blocked the relocation of the 3rd precinct. That was small, but in the totality of that moment where we had so many people saying pro-police, support the chief, that was monumental to say, no, we need to have a say. And it started with 20-something neighbors who just showed up at a park. Because my incumbent was like, yeah, we're going to go $5 million to relocate this. And we was like, hell to the no. 20 of us. And that group to have more than 200 people show up and participate in that.
Yeah. To that, I think also, like, you mentioned morale, and I think that is, like, so key. Because a lot of the questions you have to continuously ask yourself is like, I know how passionate I am. I know how fired up I am to, like, get this thing done, right, and to continue. But how do I make it possible for the rest of my colleagues to continue the work? And there's something that, I mean, like, it might not be super attractive to talk about, but, like, in those conversations and that relationship building, like, it's important to identify that person's self-interest. I know why I'm in it. I know why I'm here. But it's like, if that person just comes to my event or just comes to this meeting because I asked them to, when things get hard, that's not a good enough reason for them to continue to show up. So and they might not even know for themselves, like why am I here? Like they might not have asked, like, how can the union benefit me, right? So for a person who feels very lucky to be working at a place like the Walker Art Center, but is also like a victim of wage theft, so like, how do I get that person to understand, like, it's beneficial for everybody, including your manager who you may or may not have a good relationship with? It doesn't really matter. How do I get that person to show up to an event that their bosses are going to tell them is offensive to them, or their bosses are going to, like, pressure them to not do, right? Like, how do I get that person to identify their self-interest? Because if I'm a person who is not experiencing homelessness, but my neighbors are, like, that matters to me. It matters that that's important to me. Those are my neighbors. And so I know why I'm going to continue to show up, but to people around me who might not have identified for themselves, like, what it is that I care about, or how do I, with all of the free time that I don't have, how do I prioritize this? And it's like those conversations that you need to have, like, part of that relationship building is like developing class consciousness, is developing is developing your own political lens. Like, a lot of folks, in my experience in the organizing that I did at the Walker, a lot of folks did not have that. There were $250,000 in debt while making $45,000 a year, and feeling lucky. Like, I don't know how to tell you that it doesn't have to do like that. And so I think that, like, identifying self-interest and like celebrating the wins when they happen, and also having a clear next step, right? So we breathe the sigh of relief, and then we take the next step forward. We don't stop, right? Because after all those wins, people do drop off because they think that we won. And so part of it is also, like, making sure that like, you're doing that relationship building so they continue to show up when you ask them to, doing that narrative justice work so that they know that, like, if I get a raise, that's not a win. If me and all my coworkers have a union and can advocate for ourselves, that's a win. It's just, the work is deeper, and so the relationship has to be deeper, and so the conversations have to be deeper, and it's uncomfortable. But then it also becomes fun when you do have those victories, and you have to celebrate those victories and then take the next step forward. So morale is very important. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I just, I want us to think through a little bit of the mess of it all, right? Of the mess and of the entanglement, right? If it is the case that we're not on the same page, or if it is the case that we are entangled with the very institutions or systems that we're trying to reimagine, right? It's just what keeps us grounded, what keeps us focused within our entanglement, right? What keeps us what brings us clarity, you know. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought that's the red table.
Oh, that's hilarious.
No.
Well, I can say, my dad has this phrase that he always tells me, which is like, keep the main thing the main thing. And what that means is like, it is messy. Everything is so interconnected that it's easy to get distracted. Either because you find out just how messy everything is, and then it becomes difficult to focus on. And so, yeah, I don't know how to even say it in other words other than like keep the main thing. You have to know what that is. That's all I have to offer, and it makes sense to me. Hopefully it translates.
I think two parts again, that political analysis, because you learn that the things that we're going through, the way in which the state and capitalism responds, these are tag and tried tricks. Like they utilize the same things. So knowing that my prior ancestors, freedom fighters in the streets, they've been through this, like taking a moment you mentioned of like looking from past struggles of how to move forward. And creating that moment even with my campaign team, like we're doing study groups around like reading Lenin and looking at, the Black Messiah, Judas and the Black Messiah, like, Fred Hampton, who was a revolutionary socialist as well, like taking the space to like, okay, how what we're dealing with is kind of very similar to like what our freedom fighters of the past also responded to, and how we can learn and from like the best practices of those moments. I think also community, like you mentioned like Zumba, for instance. I'm very protective of my Zumba because that's the one predominantly Black woman-led space over in Northside that I get to have with my folks. Going to church, showing up, where you're talking about shared interests, showing up on the picket lines when workers are striking and talking about, their struggles. Going to direct actions where communities are talking about policing. Going to the meetings after the actions, like the unsexy part where you got a plan. And then the next steps, being prepared for like messy debates in those spaces about how to move forward. So it's the showing of you have to intentionally keep yourself grounded, and I'm very intentional about that because that transition into becoming an elected leader, there's so many forces in City Hall that encourages you to see your community as enemies. And to sever that relationship. And you want to know why folks get up there and they change. And it's always heard, what happened? You used to be a part of us. You used to show up. And it's there that in that space where it's like you are conditioned and encouraged to distrust your folks. Yeah. And you have to, and going in as a socialist, it's because of my folks, why I want to be in that space, why I want to fight. Why would I disconnect myself from the very life source? Yeah. So I think right now is being protective of those spaces, again, in your faith community, if it's around working out, if it's around political spaces like this, keeping yourself grounded with the people who share your interest in this collective imagination or collective vision of what you want your communities to be.
Yeah. I think about that all the time because I think we see with the management at my institution, right, they're always making decisions that just feel very out of touch, that feel very authentic. That happens a lot in leadership, and I think one of the things that I've been trying to explain recently to my management is like, of course, the decisions that you're making are out of touch. Like when you're making decisions, when the people who are helping you make those decisions are all white, all make over $150,000 a year, all are not even from here, are all from places that are not Minneapolis. Like, of course it's going to be out of touch because you don't know anybody here. You don't know what it's like to have like the average experience of like working at the Walker. You have no idea what that is. But there are lots of people who do, and they don't have a voice, right? There's like lots of people of color who, there's not a lot of people of color, but there are people of color who work here and we don't have a voice. There are lots of working class people here and we don't have a voice, right? Like, so staying connected, staying grounded, like how lucky are we that we're not like unrooted? Like how lucky are we that we have each other like that? I think is like also remembering where your power is, which is like in your collective and your community is like something that it's easy to forget because it takes a lot of time to develop and maintain relationships, which I'm sure we've all felt during COVID. Like it's a struggle sometimes to do that. But I think the relationships, the community, like that's where your power is and remembering that.
Absolutely. I have a lot more questions, but I'm going to open it up. Do folks have any thoughts, things that they're sitting and resonating on their mind?
Hi, Maya.
Hi, Mara.
I'm
good at talking to you.
too. I hear you, both of you, and I applaud you, and I encourage you to continue because in my area, in my age group, it was hard. We fought the same fight before, but it was hard when you put your voice out there and you tell us, and then everybody goes, yeah! And you turn around and nobody where'd it go? You know, or you get beat down so much because you don't have somebody to lift you up. You know? So who do you have as your support system besides each other to help carry? Because it can be very dangerous in the labor work.
Yeah.
Because I come from corporate for over 40 years. I was always outlawed as the troublemaker because I spoke my mind. Why? Because I was taught to do so. So, who do you have in action? And two, who are your allies? Because you have to have our fellow brothers and sisters to be an ally. So who do you have as your allies and who is actually helping and supporting you? I like to encourage and I like to push. I'm not the person to be out in front. I ain't marching with you. I ain't doing it. Don't judge me. But I will support you from off the line. I will give you that water. I will rub your shoulder. Hey, you can do this, you know. And when it gets too much, because people's energy can weigh you down. So, man, people got their energy. Yeah, so who do you have as your allies and who is actually helping support in these small clusters that you can actually say, I know they got my back? The questions for both of you.
I think for me, I've been, and it took many years to get to this point where I've created, I call them, they're my care squad. So I have my nutritionist and I also have my friends, as you mentioned, who I go to call when stuff pops up. They're going to send me groceries. They're going to bring me food to make sure I eat and nourishing myself. I have my trainer to make sure like I have a space physically I can relieve. I have my spiritual advisor. I have multiple because I practice Buddhism, I practice Christianity, and I have my ancestral spiritual advisor like come through with all the divine energy. I have a person who does body work because I think especially as Black women, I have so many of my friends who are now going through surgeries for fibroids and for stress-related illness, and all of them are in social justice work, and not realizing how much of this work really takes a toll on our bodies. So making sure I have someone who's going to my doctor appointments, and so like I have my care team because when I'm imbalanced, that ripples through everything that I'm trying to do when it comes to relationships. I'm not showing up well in those spaces when it comes to meeting with power brokers. I'm not showing up in the way that I need to. So you have to create your squad. And that's my family too. I think that being a big piece of that, like my husband, making time for us to be together, because that's also like my lifeline. So definitely have my care team. And when you mention my allies, because I think you're absolutely right in that sense of, and why in my campaign is like, this is not an isolated fight. This is a marriage. I tell every person we door knock who comes to our event, like I cannot go up there and do this by myself. I can't. Or that's how you see people turn in the office. So for me, I say you're an ally if you're willing to show up with me on these issues, because I want to be very cautious of, especially in politics, because relationships can be based off of convenience, what people can get from you. And I need people, as you mentioned, like most of the folks on my campaign team, these are riders who've been in the struggle, multitude of struggles for 20 something years as like an elder labor leader, and also for like the past 10 years of like issues in our communities. They showed up with the arrest, they showed up for our communities when they got evicted, like people who've been tested in struggle. Because you don't want folks who are gonna waffle on you when the pressure is hot, and the pressure is gonna be there. So for me, it's those who are people who are struggled, who've been in the struggle with me. And the folks who are invested in the issues that I'm building around, I'm going to keep it centered. If you're there to tax the rich, I'll mess with you all day. If you're there to make sure everybody got housing, cool, let's work on that. But beyond that, everyone has the same benefit of the doubt. Until again, we've been in years of struggle.
Yeah, I would echo. I think that those like the time for yourself and like spending your time that you have alone with yourself really intentionally is like very important to me. I also have I'm also like deeply spiritual, making sure that I'm like I feel better when I'm like practicing my religion. Like that's true for me. I love being in my family. I think it's like extremely important to me. And I'm also lucky to have a lot of like people who are organizers in my life and like who don't even live in Minneapolis, live in North Carolina, and they're doing labor organizing there, and like who I can talk to that's like outside of like I think one of the things that when I felt the most burnt out, I think like during this organizing campaign, the thought that I couldn't like shake was like, why do I even care if the Walker is a better place? Like, who even cares and who benefits from that? And I think like the people who can remind you like what you're doing is like going to like you're leaving the place better than how you found it. Like that's how you were raised. Like it's important to keep it like people who can keep it is important. And for me it was like my family, my blood family, my chosen family. And I think it's also like the question of like who are your allies? Like to your point is like always the question. Like I don't know, you tell me. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't have a good question. I don't have a good answer for that, but I think it's like you kind of just don't know until you're in it. Or for me, that's been the truth. That's a great question that I'm going to spend some time with for myself. It's like a reminder of like who are your allies? Like who do you go to? Besides your friends and your family and yourself.
The reason why I asked that is because when I came here, I'm from Chicago, when I came here, I made sure I became part of some organizations. Mm-hmm. And with some of these organizations, I'm like, right, good. I did the 4 years in one in my neighborhood from day one. And what I came to realize is that, hey, y'all fighting among y'all. What are people in the neighborhood at? And so because I spoke out, they said, oh, you speak out. I'm like, y'all don't speak out around here? They like, no. So when you go out there, it says you got to speak out. You go out there and knock on the doors and tell them. You know how many dogs got swept in my face and told me to get the H up around here? So now I'm discouraged. I'm going back with my tail tucked in. And so when I got to the, I don't know, you gotta figure it out. I just got here. Mm-hmm. So that was an energy drainer. I did my 4 years and I got tired of all the different in-house fighting. Everybody trying to tell how intelligent each one is when all y'all need to continue to learn. The next one the other two organizations I would not name. One of them I became a volunteer manager of housing. Well, that imploded because now even though the person was helping the community, the person was off himself. The other one, which was part of being part of the Capitol and changing legislators, they push you, but then they push you, but then they delete you. And my question was, did I get recommended for? They took me to the Capitol, and I looked, and I said, well, where the black people at on here? Okay. Then all the different organizations within the community of St. Paul, which I live in, and everybody, as long as the legislature, when you change the legislative count, they give out the little pennies, everybody got their name out, and everybody pitching their ideas, give, but then they don't do anything with it. They actually went to the corporations to beautify the community and not to help the community within. So I got burned out with doing this. And I thought that some of our paler comrades, our paler brothers and sisters were actually allies, but they were actually not. Yeah. This is why I asked, because it's a whole different atmosphere here in Minnesota than it is in Chicago. We're directly coming out and tell you just like it is here. So this is why I asked, who's the allies? I'm the person that I will encourage you and tell you to move forward. And I'm still recruiting actually from these organizations, because the other organizations I became on the board for 2 years. Now, I will name one, which I really wish I had stuck, but I wasn't mentally prepared for that, and I was the low income committee. They have pushed me and another sister, and I became the chair. She became the co-chair. And as soon as we became chair and co-chair, everybody here everything. I didn't tell you nothing. When before everything was open. And we both looked at each other going, you see this? And she's from here. I ain't. So I gave up. I gave her the seat. I stayed for 6 months. I gave it to her. And I knew she was going to carry it. She stayed for 6 months and she was gone. Because they didn't. Everybody closed up. Nobody opened up, but they were so open to see somebody of diversity come in and help. And then all of a sudden, so that could be dangerous. It could be devastating some things. So I decided just give me my paintbrush, my art, and my acrylics, and I'm gonna do it from there. But you can't tell me what I can't do. You can't do nothing with that. So yeah. So again, for all of us in the art, I'm not a political person, I'm not, but I will stand and I will use my art in any way possible to bring it all together, because we do need to help, and we do need to carry you all. We do need to help. We do need to carry you all. I'm going to say it again. We do need to carry you all, because we need the strength. And we need to see you all through it. We need to see the brother through it with this. We need to see the brother through it with your elder. I might not even agree with everything, but I can respect you to the utmost, because you deserve that. So everyone.
Raise one of the, because I think that's important around organizing, and when you talk about messiness. Because one thing I don't do, which is funny, when I'm going to politics, I don't do mess. And it's realizing, I think part of organizing, my first few years I got burned out because I went through a multitude of community coalitions, and I saw the infighting. I saw people who were out there about their own self-interest, and they used the suffering of our communities to elevate themselves, to be the Jesse Jacksons and the Al Sharptons. And I was like, that is not what I want.
and acknowledging that those folks exist. That doesn't mean they get, and they often do act as gatekeepers, but they don't get to determine your pathway of change in your community. There is way many more folks who have not been touched by those minority organizations, and I found that out through this campaign. There is a multitude. We might have 10,000 nonprofits, but they don't have bases. I can tell you that. They don't have bases of folks that they claim to represent, and you have the opportunity to touch the folks based off of however, if it's with yoga, like you get to bring that to them. They don't give you permission to do that. So I think that is part of organizing. It's also knowing, okay, I know about that group. Like there is me and my team. We know about that group. All right, how do we strategize our relationship with that group and knowing the history of it? That is part of organizing with relationship management. It's also being honest. Like some of the leaders were invited out to an action. Okay, here's the container that we won't give them. You got 5 minutes. You got to go. Like, so I think that's part of also organizing and knowing the landscape in which you are trying to build these relationships with, and it influences your strategizing. If you know that group is going to be out here minimalizing the stuff that you're doing, you have to say, do you call it out or do you don't even engage them? Focus on what you're building. And I have learned that the part, I swear it's similar, like 3 years in, I was like, and this is trash. I mean, literally, I was like, look back at corporate America, I went and worked at Dollar Tree, because I was like, I never want to put in the movement, building or organizing space. This stuff is toxic. There's a lot of people who are traumatized and they're projecting their trauma onto one another in those spaces, and it's not healthy. Which is why you have to have full ownership over what you're talking about, how you care for yourself. Because there are some groups, there's some people out here who will drain you of every last bit of energy that you allow them
to. And one thing I'm just thinking, like, what's the container to get through and fighting in the movement? Is the container social media? Is the container a local co-op? Is the container a phone call? Is the container grace? What, you know?
I think grace. Oh, yeah.
I don't know, that's maybe something like just I don't know, even having a program specifically, almost like a marriage counselor, like something, a space.
Marriage counseling for the movement.
Yeah, people can come through for real, like a space that people can come through and just like have, I don't know how to work, mediator or something like that. Like not too many people, because you know we can't have a whole bunch of people, like a certain amount of people just coming in and talking and trying to figure it out. That's the only thing I can think of.
I say give them grace and please hold me to everything I say. I implore you to do so. Okay, because that's an encouragement. You know, and I think giving this grace, you can't blast these people, you know, that have been doing this in house fighting. Mississippi Market on 7th Street East, Dave Blood. I remember because I was on the board, we were all excited. And they're going to make sure the people in the neighborhood get those jobs. I don't know how many actually in the neighborhood got a job. They pulled them from Selby, they pulled them from one over there on Snelling. I don't know how many people that actually in the neighborhood had a job. But the in-house, it was just ridiculous. But great, giving them grace, and also, as we see, like this brother here, and you all, the strength, and this brother here, all of us staying in touch and staying together, and all of us all being accountable for what we're giving, that beats. And so I think that effective. Wasn't it one of these exercises? What the tactics? Yeah. So I don't consider the others my enemies, but we have to draw strength from those that give us strength. We have to do that. And success is the only way. You gotta be successful. What police officer are you applying for?
Ward 2 in city council.
Where is that at?
South Minneapolis, so.
Oh yeah, you know, you got it.
You got my vote.
Okay, and you're for bettering the labor between
Yeah,
cultures?
I mean, I was part of the labor organizing at the Walker.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah. And we see what Black Table Arts is doing. So, yeah, we give these people grace of being successful and not worrying about them and what they're doing. Because hopefully if what you all are doing, what every one of us are doing successfully, we'll rub off on them. So we have to extend grace. Extra grace.
But you're right, y'all might do need to be intervention. I mean, grace, you hit on half of the part. In order for accountability to work, you have to be willing to be held accountable.
Yes.
And we've experienced this. We talked about infighting, and I do believe a lot of us talk a lot about Mariama Kaba's like transformative justice, and we rarely put it into practice. What does it look like in a transformative way to hash out our conflict, and also for people to discern personal conflict and political conflicts are very different. Very different. And folks don't get that. I think in a lot of our spaces and having containers, I know many of our community members have stepped up to provide peer counseling for folks in the movement. You know, folks have extended grace of like, let me call the people that's in some of these organizations to have direct conversations about the issues. And when, you know, those things get deflected, that's when you see public call outs. But I do agree there does need to be some type of organized, if it's restorative justice, or, you know, some of our healers in our communities, and I can see, you know, Black Table Arts being a space of like, look, come here, we got to hash this out. And however much time is needed to, again, discern, like you mentioned, like, I might not agree with what you know, but I respect it, and I will not get in the way of what you're trying to do. At least to that space, can we be neutral? Don't be out here, you know, change blocking. Like, let's not do that.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I think as artists, I know many of us in this space are artists, that it is very important for us to educate ourselves. So, for example, I have an upcoming opportunity at the Walker Art Center for the Pierre's production. I'll be an announcer. And due to COVID, majority of the event, there was like 19 shows, now we got like 3. Majority of the event was canceled. And so they offered us a cancellation payment, an honorarium. And I thought that was sweet of them. I was like, oh, that's so sweet. I didn't have to do anything, and I got free money. But this past week, I worked on like a real production. I was a PA turned DA, productions assistant turned director's assistant, because I knew Minnesota and was able to kind of direct the thing themselves. But just speaking, they were like, oh, they're supposed to do that. Like, you know, like they didn't give me a favor. And I was like,
Yes. Yeah.
And now I'm reading an email where there's like this super long like apology for them offering so little. And then he's like, I was gonna call you, but I thought that this email would service, and then if you don't want to talk to me at all, that's fine. And I'm like, you want more? And I'm like, am I supposed to be that? Like, I read it, and I'm like, I think I just need to know better, because maybe I am owed this.
Yeah.
So like, it just makes me want to like dig deeper into like, educate myself as an artist, so I know, because apparently a lot of the other performers were like, this is too little.
Yeah.
You guys offered us 25% when we're owed more, because it did affect our livelihoods. So
Absolutely. And this is one of the things that I think I'm so glad you could bring this up. Because I think also that a lot of us who work part-time, who only have part-time jobs, who work in the gig economy, like it's important that we be able to get paid. That's true for everybody, but I think it's like, for some reason, it's not universally understood that people need to get paid. Like, and I'm trying to find, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so many thoughts I'm trying to edit myself as I speak, but this is part of like labor justice, is like this like wage transparency that is like that translates to like gig economy part-time work as well. Because it's like, how do I even know how do I know how to advocate for myself? Or that I can advocate for myself, or that I can negotiate. Like we were doing this professional development training for the past few months, and recently in my department, we offered someone payment to do something, and they came back and said, that's not enough, like this is my fee. And we were like shocked that they did that. And so like we're confused, like, oh my god, can we still hire them? Do we have to like find someone else? And it's like we're literally trying to like do this professional development training to try to let people know what their rights are, and then we're not even ready to practice what we're preaching. Like, and that's one of the things that I think is like, you know, a lot of people when you call them hypocrites, they don't receive that super well. At this point, I've given my notice, so I'm not going to be hypocrites, and they, you know, they can't fire me because I'm union. So, but it's like, how do we get to the point where we can like influence like the narrative and talk about we need to be able to like people need to be able to support their lives. How do we as like a major employer of a lot of artists in cities do that? Like that and like view that as part of our work. And then when we start talking about it, how do we make sure that we're holding each other accountable so that we can actually do it? And this is what you're saying is part of a larger conversation that we've been having at the Walker. Through a lot of our organizing too, we've been talking about how do we, as like, you know, salaried or like, you know, people who are like W-9 employees at the Walker. The Walker employs a lot of people who don't necessarily like work here, right? If that makes sense. Like a lot of people come here for goods, a lot of people work here on contract. Like how do we make sure that what we lift as we climb? And so what you're saying is like exactly part of the conversation. And I'm glad that you're able to have that conversation. And even though I'm leaving, like please consider me a resource when it comes to like, because I work on the arts admin side, so that's like for everyone. Like, if you have questions about like arts administration, even if I can't answer, I can finish.
Can we get some snaps to our panel, please? Yeah. Absolutely. Thank y'all so much for being here. I so appreciate it. And so next to wrap up No Future Without, we're gonna have a phenomenal community workshop on quilt making, facilitated by Paige of the Million Artists Movement. It's gonna be so great. We're gonna actually really make a quilt. So that's gonna be fun. So stick around for that. There's some more snaps to our panel. Thank you. Yeah. Well, so take like a 3-minute break, and then we're gonna get into this quilt making.
And I saw your email. But yeah, so I'll be there at 2:30. And
I've done everything in 2014. I've been for years. I've been back in 2018. So I'm gonna want
thank you.
Holding up on there. Huh? Are you holding up? Yeah, thank you. My brother was the best last night. Yeah.
Candy prices stand up on that next one. You be close, girl. I wish I could have came home and take me a nap. Yes. Yeah, I'll put my campaign in over here. This is me on Facebook and Gmail.
Appreciate y'all sticking around. One more time. Oh, okay. I'm not yeah. I think it's good.
Yeah. Right, I noticed that it's very nice to meet you. I'm interested in sort of makes a choice about running the city council where it is debilitating and it does want to feel a frog in the water. You know, it's like, oh yeah, it's just a little warm now. And all of a sudden, you're wrong place. How's your, what's your thoughts about that coalition? I think that's where
I think it started you know, they had to start some of that. More the housing. Yeah, and same around like going down the line. So and then I think our campaign is trying to play a role in like, we want, folks who are doing boundary justice, certain almost like folks who are doing stuff around public safety. And like around like, so it's like, what,
That's what's the best thing because the people never came.
Clearly, that's almost how we can get right. We have this conversation, and I guess does that become a plus? Oh,
might not know the work that we making like in our workshop that we did when we put it in. What are you doing now? Right now, on public media. So it's like, okay, here's a good way to recognize self-interest when you pay someone to live.
yeah.
That's like language. Maybe that's an added campaign that's happening. So I think it's also creating that space for other organizations, like even the darker that I'm partnering with, or they're paid out of like our organizations or precinct, called consumer healthy abolition. Like they just did a community defense training and for our neighbors in the park. So it's like, okay, we include that information in our workshop. Like we literally have neighbors like showing the power to not police one another. So it's for us, it's like they can claim that the but also like working in tandem because like you are our allies, especially when we go to office, like when we're bringing up organizations around house and around
And here.
I'm just going to take a minute to explain the closing, and then most of it is self-guided and really. So, in case you weren't here yesterday, I'm here representing the artist movement. One of our main things that we do is poetry quilt making. So you'll see us at, you'll see us at George Boyd Square over the summer. We did a lot of quilt making there. We've been around. Harry knows all about that. Listen, Harry was working the quilting table. Harry was probably responsible for half the quilts we had that summer. But anyway, yeah, so I think today, when you make your square, we're going to focus specifically on some of the things you learned over the weekend, or the things you've still been thinking about, what's simmering in your mind, and especially visions of community safety, community liberation. What does that look like? So, once you make your square, afterward, like our sewers, we'll put them all together into one of our quilts. So you see it on the quilt somewhere, probably. Yeah, along with other ones. The only really rule, like technical rule, is to try to leave a 1/4 inch border around the whole thing so we have room to sew it together. So without a measuring stick, that's about like a finger width. That's about what we need, 1/4 inch to an inch. And there's all kinds of different methods you can use here. If you're not a sewer, that is fine. There are markers you can draw to your heart's content. Okay, but there are also needle and thread. Now, if in the design of your quilt square, you do want like something stitched on, like maybe you want to take one of these ribbons or something to make a border, or you want to cut out a piece of fabric and have that be a shape on there, but you feel like you're not a great sewer and you don't want to take that on yourself. What we do is pin them. Pin the design on there, exactly how you want it to go. If you're not really sure how to pin things, also I can help you with that. I'm happy to just like help you pin it on. So that'll be understandable for our solar and how it goes. So yeah, there's lots of safety pins here. There's lots of needles, sewing pins, fabric scraps. Feel free to go through the bag and use whichever ones you want. Scissors. Make sure you return all the scissors to this table. Give them to the pants. And go with our sewing kit. So yeah. Oh, one other thing. There's just the paper here and cardboard and like old folders because these markers will bleed through the fabric onto the surface. So whatever you're using. So make sure you put one underneath your quilt square. Pick whatever color you want out of all of these. And yeah, I think that is it. To start your quilt squares for Black Liberation.
Thank you.
So if you want to see examples and like further instructions, there are these books up here that explain a little bit more of the history of the quilts, the symbolism behind the Million Artist Movement Power Tree, pictures of past quilts as well from like the earlier days when we first started doing it. Yeah, if you don't want to sew it on yourself, make sure you take safety pins in and pin it exactly where you want it to go.
The women I went to travel. Yeah, so that's a year out.
Yes, Mom.
Started small.
There's also free posters here if you want one. Feel free to take one. Take one, take two, take three. We got plenty.
Well, you know, it's it's a different kind of struggle, but it's a hustle, and you just have to do it. And then once you get the people around you, because he's got all of them support each other, you know, in so many different ways. Whether it's someone's doing things, then we have to support that person in theirs. They got the video thing they're doing, whatever else going to be done. So they build a network, and so all you have to do is like, when you're network, and I'm going to go, you just support Jordan, you're at the network. Because he'll go, what do you want to do? I want. The blood, right? Yeah, so that's it. So, instead of running shots, we got a support system. Just to figure out. So, have you done these panels for the quilt?
I've done something.
It's my favorite thing because I get people to. Okay, let's see what I do. So you know I still call it the quilting for Black Liberation.
You know, I'm sorry to say that, right?
Yeah.
So a question that we have from our audience that are watching in is that, is this quilt going to be sewn today or later?
Later. Yeah,
Later.
later.
I don't know if this individual wants me to share all of the.
No, when I give you a run, I do a part.
Are these like examples?
Where do you need to go? Yes.
So here's some examples. You want to talk? Explanations of the power tree.
Yeah. So
Yes.
the focal point of a lot of the quilts, not all of them because we make them for different purposes, is this power tree. that is part of the Million Artist Movement logo. It has pretty significant symbolism. The fist is at the bottom, that's the roots, is all about the roots of the movement and what we need to grow, the basis that we need to grow. It also guides our framework that we organize with together. So, yeah, like you'll see the explanation of the symbolism here. The strength of the tree is in the roots. Same is true for the movement. They represent critical work that we need to be grounded. The trunk is what we're after, Black liberation and freedom. The branches represent the diverse ways that many people contribute to. And then we have more about the power treatments. There's the technical aspects, you know, how large it should be, what your margins should be, and all of that. How to get it done, how to make your quilts. And just some pictures of, you know, really old now, probably like some of our earliest quilts are represented in these photos.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So,
Does that say unidentified homeless man shot and killed?
yeah.
Wow.
So people have made quilt squares to represent all kinds of things. It could be community members who were victims of state violence. It could be about certain community issues that are happening at the time. It could be more on the side of like your hopes and dreams and what you'd like to see in your community or what your vision could say to your generation is.
And do you keep items here? Like if members aren't able to come to the event, but they want to pick up a square, maybe do a little art project here and leave it for you so that it can be sewn into a quilt as well? Or they want to pick up a square, take it home, and bring it back and then have it be incorporated into one of the quilts. Is that possible?
I think that's possible. That's definitely possible. Anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
Yeah, anything is possible. You can come here and also follow Million Artist Movement on Facebook to see where we'll be quilting. If you want to come and make a quilt with us there, or if you make a quilt square and then just want to drop it off to us to be part of a quilt. Yes. Oh, here's some more pictures of examples of quilt squares.
That's really cool.
Who drew this? Ooh, that's a good question. I forgot that. I think it says in here somewhere on one of the pictures. Here's a quilt put together.
Wow.
That's what it looks like. And because we have so many of them and we would take them so many places to be displayed, you can see how we built like these poles that they stand on, like stand-alone ones. So you might even see us in marches with them. There are ones that are way longer than this and are big, long banners. The longest one that we have is one that we made for the fight against the oil pipeline. And that banner is 21 feet long.
Wow.
Yeah. There's one of them hanging up at the water detector sites in Minnesota.
Really? Where's that?
Yeah, I think the one that's there is in Palisade, Minnesota, and it's near the place where Line 3 oil pipeline will cross the Mississippi River. So there is a water protector camp there, and we got a big book for them to use.
Yes, Donna Ray is watching it. Donna, she was here before. She said she had to leave a little early. Donna, thank you for still tuning in.
Thank you for being here, Donna.
So, Donna, you can still get involved if you like to.
Oh, here's some more individual squares. So you see there's like a lot of different methods that people have used. Some just use markers, others
Patterns
are
on top of patterns.
yep. Some this one almost has a weaving in it. I love this is my favorite. You don't have to be a gun.
Nice.
More about the poetry.
I'm going to show a few samples here.
the systems and how they work. You know, like that thing when we made artist movement about being stewards. It's like we're like everybody does.
Harry, what do you got going on?
So many things. Right now, I'm trying to make. I'm making a panel that's about intersecting arts.
That's what that is.
That's really fun. Because it's what I sort of experienced when I was here in Black Table Arts.
Nice.
And then there's this intersection of these different generations and different kind of experiences that people can bring here. And so I'm looking forward to coming back. Maybe a little bit more intentionally what I can do for this week.
Nice. What are you creating?
The first verse will be faith as a bridge.
Oh, yes.
And then we're going to talk about grace. And we're going to talk about love. It's going to turn into something. I just don't know what that is yet.
Let's enjoy. Here we go.
Poetry quote. What do we have here?
Good question. Working on, I'm thinking something around the long lines of like a tree, kind of digging into the roots and the sense. So, meeting farmers, we get started.
Here we have different patterns and colors. What's the measurement? Yeah, that's all my phone. Each square is 12 by 12. Okay, Chris, got you. So we are right now creating the Power Tree Quilt Project. And so you see someone here have a few different shapes and colors and figures. She got some Minnesota Vikings colors, purple on top of golden yellow. Representative Robin. You see, I'm already speaking it into existence. Representative Robin have something that she's created here. Colors. Hi. Wait, what is your vision for your quilt? Your quilt square.
Don't know yet.
Okay, putting it together.
I'm putting it together.
Stage 1 of planning. Stage 1 of planning is create the plan. And what is your goal? What are you doing here?
I'm going to do some messaging with trim here, and my message is our trauma is not your drama. Try to spell out better.
Oh, our drama is not your drama. That's cool.
Because people seem to be trying to capitalize our grieving process here. Case in point that Dante, right?
Right.
You can't go over political so on him. Then grieving process just passed away. So just want to keep people's minds and hearts in the right place. And what they should be focusing on. That's great. Okay, no, stay connected.
Yeah, somewhere right, that neighborhood. Things that are bothering about
Are we supposed to write on this? Are we write on these two? Delphina? Can we write on this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Rio! Yes. Yes. Yes, please. So I got my teaching a class called hip hop performance, and so each day is a different element. So they do break dancing, there's spoken word rap, there's session with kids, fucking awesome teachers. They have like this guy who's a graffiti artist here who lives in New York. So he teaches us about guidelines like how to do your bed, how to do button letters, how to do these. Or how to do with one person that, great things. Like actually teaching them how to make their head and pulling up. It's like when I'm at that point, it's like, this thing works. And then hang out with them here. And they, like something like this, is what they're loving. Because they get the class is about equality. And then show them work, but it has to have social justice aspect. What's the themes that you're working with? So they become really aware that, oh, right, it should be about something. And that's your brain. But I can tell me that. This, if I express something, yeah. So it really, this is just a reminder about why do certain things come up for you that you're responding to when you respond? And mine is just really clear about that heart to really, if there's some need, there's some yearning. That's what I get. There's a yearning for like, how do we even support each other? But we're going to support each other. But those
Some of the books are coming together.
Trainings to me are very frustrating. It's like, oh, we have a training about DEI. Are you just say, yeah, I'm doing training. Are you using it? And it's the same with a lot of the marketing activities. Because I'm starved. I'm actually starved. But here it's like learning. I'm a good student, but I hate school. I do have like this thing yeah, I know that's right. The late age. Like, I'm done. You got the age, thank you. Okay, that's my simple. We can take a big one.
Listen, we do this all the time. So, oh, still, it's nothing. They come out with this masterpiece. They're artists. Like,
I didn't want to overdo it. Like, take it away from me before I go back to it. Your songs, I love people with this. You're doing it too. With layers of fabric and ideas.
I mean, it's cute when everybody else does it. Yeah, I love people do it. Like, but like, every time I do it, like, oh, I want this.
Oh!
Oh, you know what? There's also going to
It makes me a little more maybe. She's the most honest person I've ever seen. But I think she knows. I don't talk about the narcissism. You know, you let them know that narcissism. But I think she knows. She just has to do certain things to be all of it. But I love her energy. She has a mind that's like, whoa. It's AOC. It's like, it's a reason. There's one weird she's yeah. I love her speaking about herself.
I like this. It's really very.
Oh, this is for real Minneapolis.
You see,
Because it's like kids over the north side, and so they got a fundraiser, and of course, I didn't even been Chicago. Chicago.
is this your dad's home?
Oh, yes, but she's not running.
No, y'all got like 6 people.
See, that's what I don't know what's going on.
Y'all got 6 people in there, but it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's going right now. Yeah.
We're doing a little bit of quilting now. It's going to be, these small squares are going to be added to a larger piece. Each square is a 12 by 12. And you can take other squares and add them to your square and just create different textures and designs. Love what she said. She said, our trauma is not your drama.
Wow.
That's what she is preparing to showcase here. As you can see, our trauma is not your drama, as she said. Which is good because we're talking about. Tell us what you meant by that again, as it pertains to like the Dante rights.
Well, how I felt watching that funeral, how I didn't feel like it was about the person who had passed.
Right.
So much it was more about the movement and George Floyd. I think they probably mentioned George Floyd's name more often in that funeral than Dante Wright's name. And I just felt like they were using that young man's trauma that family was going through to push their own. This is what we kind of do for us. You know, I didn't think it was an appropriate time, an appropriate platform for us to do that. So,
It was like a media frenzy.
Right.
It was like
having Jesse Jackson come in there
What rights?
and things like that. So I was troubled by that. You know, the family just probably just want to sit home and cry. And here they are put the spotlight, you know, to all this other extra stuff. I just felt it was a little too much.
I was obsessed because I saw there was even a picture in the paper about some McAllister students who were there, like looking with our bags of food that we're taking out to the site. What the fuck? Excuse me.
Right.
It's like, if you're just going to do that, then just do that. Don't do it because look at us what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
That just floored me.
It's like exploitation in a way, huh?
It is.
It really is.
They're getting, oh, I'm doing all the right things, and you can see what I'm doing. I've got food and bags of things that I can go shopping at Whole Foods. Because they were taking Whole Foods bags, and then let me bring these to these poor people out here.
Like, where's it been all year? You know?
Where were you like last year?
Right.
You know, when he died,
Where were you when these people are
one
living
thing
in
I
these
did
tents
say,
and stuff? Taking food to them, you know?
it wasn't a popular thing to say, but I said it because that's my opinion. I'm not putting profit out for somebody to death. I'm not doing it.
Right.
No offense and nothing against anybody that was able to do and able to carry that, grief like that, but I just saw it in a different light. It wasn't a popular light.
Yeah.
What's the fine with me?
That's right. You're entitled also. Like, respect you where you're at. I just know, like, he was like, my body has already been thrown to the ground and balls and straight and handcuffed.
Okay. I got scarred, boy. I got scarred.
I would eat your piece of but these knees, no.
Hold me accountable for that because I will do that.
Yeah, I'm there. And I just want to know what other ways I can be with this. What I need to do.
Well, like I said yesterday, I think it's very important that when after the hoopla is done, and everybody is there, and you stood there,
Yeah.
you need somebody to say, hey, I got you.
I got
Give me an arm, one on the arm.
Right.
I'm there. I'm
That's
right
the
there.
thing when somebody in your family dies and it's like everybody's here and then they go. It's like you that all your
Tell me what you need, Gary.
Right, tell me what you need.
Yeah.
It's like no, you're having your own grief again and then nobody's there. So I was telling myself like, no, I'll see you 2 weeks after the funeral. That's when I'm coming down.
Yeah.
Because you got everybody else. And you need me.
You're gonna need for 2 weeks from now, they're gonna need you a month from now. They're gonna need you a year from now, you know what I'm saying?
Yes. It snowed today.
Thank God it was short lived.
It was snowing.
I missed all that.
You were busy.
Yeah.
You were being focused.
Yes.
This is an amazing space. This whole thing.
And now he has space in the upstairs apartment.
Yeah, you just showed it to me. That's
It's beautiful.
Yes, it's very sad.
upstairs on the second floor. This is
It's really needed because for the Italian children, it's such a overload
yeah.
that we gotta find space for people to go. So it's really wonderful.
Where people can actually be safe too.
Yeah,
You know, it's not like you're having to just show up.
it's needed. Needed.
So popular, yeah, the best one now. It's my favorite color.
Yeah. We don't need y'all.
Hi,
Thank you,
guys.
sir.
Yeah. I'm really running a GSA. So, my ASL, so we will be listing them
Oh, yeah, here. Let me write my cell phone number is 612-998-0700. Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Thank you. Have a good night. Good night, everyone.
Bye. It's supposed to be a party, and now it's something.
The quotes from yesterday. I want to pack them up in the suitcase.
What do you have going on? What's your? I have no clue. We are just going with the flow right now. It's supposed to be a book. And sometimes, you give yourself limits. And you have to eliminate. So you just roll with it.
Are you actually sewing it? You are sewing them. Wow.
I'm sewing very sloppy, but yes.
Let's see your square. Non-judgmental awareness, embodied witness. No, that's what an eyewitness is, no? Or should be, right? I guess. Yeah. I know. Anybody else want to? Let's see. Our trauma is not your drama. Wow, that is very powerful. All right, everyone. This is the quilting being made. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been No Future Without Art. I encourage you to do something that brings you joy. And without further ado, I will say stop living to exist. Start living on purpose, and you can do all that and more with News on Purpose. Signing out.